This video is about hyperbola. So we're going to graph a hyperbola given an equation. We're going to write the equation of a hyperbola given a graph. So there's two forms for a hyperbola because one of our coordinates is going to be negative. So when the x is positive, we have a graph where the branches open left to right. When we have a positive y, we have branches that open up and down. So let's look at the important information that we need in order to graph a hyperbola. So the center is the same as a circle and an ellipse. We're going to take the h and the k to get our center. The rx is still going to represent our x radius, and the ry is still going to represent our y radius. C represents our focal radius. And unlike in an ellipse, it doesn't matter to find your focal radius by which radius is larger, because to find our focal radius in a hyperbola, your focal radius is equal to rx squared plus ry squared. So this time it doesn't matter which radius is larger or smaller. To find our foci location, we have two different times that it happens. So if we have x being positive, we're going to add the focal radius to our x-coordinate and subtract it to our x-coordinate. So we would have h plus c comma k and h minus c comma k. Now, if our y is positive, then we're going to add and subtract the focal radii from the y coordinate. So we would have h comma k plus c and h comma k minus c. So let's look at an example of an equation to graph our hyperbola. So in number 1, we have parentheses x minus 4 squared divided by 3 minus y plus 2 over 5 squared equals 1. So in this case, because there's no negative sign out front of the x, that means it's positive. So if our x is positive, when we draw our graph, we got to remember that it should be opening left to right. So looking at my equation, the center here then is at 4, negative 2. The x radius is under the x equation, so 3. The r radius is under the y, 5. To find the focal radius, we're going to take the square root of our focal radius squared and add together. So we get the square root of 34. Now we need a decimal in order to graph this. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth, so we get 5.83. Because our x is positive, we're going to be adding and subtracting the focal radius from our x-coordinate. So we would have 4 plus 5.83 comma negative 2 and 4 minus 5.83 comma negative 2. So when I add and subtract those, I get a coordinate of 9.83 comma negative 2 and negative 1.83 comma negative 2. So to start graphing our hyperbola, we're going to put the center on our graph first. So the center in this case is 4, negative 2. Then I'm going to use my r radius. I'm going to go 3 to the left and 3 to the right. I'm going to use my y radius to go up 5 and down 5. Now, when I have my radii for x and y plotted, I'm going to create a box with those 4 points. Then through this box, I'm going to draw 2 diagonal lines that go through the corner and the center. This helps us see how big our branches should be of the hyperbola. Now, because it's an x is positive hyperbola, we're going to use the x radius as the vertexes for my branches. So here's one branch, And here's my second branch of the hyperbola. The last thing we need to do then is plot our focal radii. So I'm going to go to 9.83 comma -2. Because it's a decimal, remember, I'm just going to estimate it. And then I'm going to go to -1.83 comma -2. Now I've plotted a hyperbola. So let's try one more example of graphing. So in number 2, we have negative parenthesis x plus 3/2 squared plus y minus 1/6 squared equals 1. So this time, because y is positive, that means we are going to have a hyperbola that opens up and down. So my center in this case is at -3, 1. My x radius is 2, and my y radius is 6. So to find my focal radius, I'm going to square those two radii and add them together, and then take the square root. So 2 squared plus 6 squared is the square root of 40. And I need to get that into a decimal, which is 6.32 when I round to my nearest hundredth. Now, because it's y being positive, we're going to add and subtract the focal radius from the y coordinates. We have -3, 1 plus 6.32 and -3, 1 minus 6.32, which gets us -3, 7.62 and -3, -5.32. So now I can start graphing. So first I want to graph my center at -3, 1. Then I'm going to use my x radius. So I'm going to go 2 to the left and 2 to the right. And my y radius. So I'm going to go up 6 and down 6. Then I'm going to create my box. And draw my diagonal lines through the corner and the center. Once I have done that, I'm going to use the y radius coordinates as my vertexes for my branches. So I have one branch going up and down, and my second branch going up and down. The last thing I need to do then is plot my focal radii. So I have one at -3, 7.32, so very close this time to the vertex. And -3, -0.532. And now I've created my picture. Now let's work the opposite direction. So we're going to have an equation of a hyperbola, and we need to write the equation of it. So when I'm writing the equation of it, first I notice that it's opening up and down. So I know that my y has to be positive in my equation. Then I need to find the center, which is where my diagonals are intersecting. So in this case, my center is 2, 1. I need my x radius. So how far is the box drawn from the left and right of the center point? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my x radius is 6. And how far did I go up or down from the center? So 1, 2, 3. So my y radius is 3. So in this case then, my equation is going to be x minus 2/6 squared. And my x is negative, so that's going to go on the outside. Plus, because y is positive, parentheses, x minus 1/3 squared equals 1. Remember, my equations always equal 1. Let's look at number 5. Now the equation is opening left to right, which means x is going to be positive. My center point is where those diagonals intersect. So in this case, my center is at -2, 2. My x radius, how far left and right did I go from the center? 1, 2, 3. And my y radius, how much I go up and down from the center. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'm going to write my equation. X is positive, so I have parentheses x minus 2 over 3 squared minus, because the y has to be negative this time, y, my x coordinate should be x plus 2, y minus 2 over 4 squared equals 1.